The hands of a Roman child once clutched a toy just like the one you might have held. We are about to bring that ancient world of play back from the dirt and ashes of history. This is not a lecture about dusty artifacts behind glass. We have physically recreated the actual toys of ancient Rome, from simple wooden rattles to intricate strategy games, so you can finally understand the sounds, the feel, and the reality of being a kid 2,000 years ago. You will see these forgotten treasures in action, discovering a side of the Roman Empire you have never seen before. How did a simple doll prepare a girl for her future? And what secret strategies hid within a soldier's favorite board game? What do you think connects your own childhood to one lived so long ago, a child's wooden doll? Her face worn smooth by countless hugs, was found preserved in the wet, anaerobic mud of a Roman military fort. This is the kind of evidence that fuels our search. These are not just objects, they are time capsules, surviving against all odds. We find them in the most intimate of places. Simple clay animals and articulated dolls made of bone or ivory are discovered in the ruins of wealthy villas, while humble wooden swords and spinning tops come from the barracks towns where soldiers' families lived. The context of their discovery tells a powerful story. When a toy is placed carefully in a child's grave, it speaks volumes about love, loss, and the belief in a play-filled afterlife. But our knowledge does not come from artifacts alone. The Romans themselves painted a vivid picture of their childhood on the walls of their homes. In Pompeii, a fresco shows two toddlers, their chubby hands guiding a small cart. A mosaic from a different villa depicts a group of boys engrossed in a game of knucklebones, their postures frozen in competitive concentration for eternity. And then we have the words of the people who lived then. The poet Ovid writes of young girls playing with dolls made of wax or terracotta, dressing them for their own imagined weddings. Another writer, Perseus, describes the clatter of nuts on a marble floor as boys gambled their prized playthings in a popular game. These literary whispers, combined with the physical evidence, allow us to hear the echoes of laughter in the forum and the quiet murmurs of children in the courtyard. So how do we take these fragments, these whispers from the past, and rebuild them into something you can hold in your hand today? The sound of that first rattle must have been a familiar comfort in every Roman home. We chose to recreate one of the most common types, a hollow terracotta pig, its surface once brightly painted. Inside, we placed a handful of tiny clay pellets. When you shake it, the sound is not a harsh jangle, but a soft, earthy clatter, a gentle percussion that would have been the soundtrack to an infant's earliest days. This was far more than just a noisemaker. Romans called these objects crepundia, and they served a profound dual purpose. The noise entertained the baby, yes, but it also served to frighten away malevolent spirits that might wish the child harm. Think of it as a parent's first line of defense, a charm of sound and symbol. The animal shape itself was not arbitrary. Pigs were associated with fertility and protection in the Roman world, making this simple toy a powerful amulet. Holding our modern replica, you feel the rounded, safe form, perfectly sized for a tiny hand to grasp. You hear the benign rattle that was believed to create a protective circle of sound around a crib. It is a humble object, but in its design we see the hopes and fears of every Roman parent, woven into the clay alongside the noise-making stones. A wooden horse on 4 small wheels once clattered across a Roman floor. We recreated this classic pull-along toy based on fragments found in settlements from Britain to Syria. The body is carved from a single piece of hardwood, its form smoothed by a craftsperson's knife until the shape of a sturdy pony emerged. The legs are thick and stable, designed to withstand the rough pulls and tumbles of an active toddler. The most ingenious part is the simple axle, a single dowel of wood connecting two solid discs that form the wheels. It is a mechanism so fundamental, so perfectly balanced, that it still feels satisfying to use today. When you pull the string attached to its chest, the horse does not just drag, it comes alive, the wheels producing a rhythmic clack, clack, clack as they turn. This sound was the echo of a bustling Roman world. For a child, this toy was not merely a horse. It was a chariot in the Circus Maximus, a merchant's cart loaded with goods, or a soldier's mount on the frontier. This was occupational play in its purest form. A young boy pulling his wooden horse was rehearsing for a life filled with travel, trade, and military service. A girl guiding her wheeled bird might be mimicking the delivery of messages or the rituals of a temple offering. These toys were a safe, miniature stage where a child could practice the rhythms and roles of the adult society they were about to enter. The simple act of pulling a string was a journey into their own future. But the most intimate connection to a Roman child comes from their dolls. For most children, a doll was not a purchased luxury. It was a simple creation of love. A bundle of rags tied into a head and body, perhaps with a few stitches for a face, or a stick figure whittled from a scrap of wood. These humble companions were loved fiercely, their features worn away by countless hours of play in dusty courtyards. We recreated one such doll, using only scraps of linen and wool, and holding it feels profoundly human. It is soft, light, and entirely shaped by the imagination of the child who held it. This was the reality of play for the vast majority of Rome's youth. Yet for the daughters of the elite, dolls were something else entirely. They were masterpieces of miniature art. We carefully recreated one based on a spectacular find from a wealthy girl's tomb. Her body is carved from smooth, pale ivory, with jointed limbs that move at the shoulders and hips. She would have been dressed in finely woven tunics, perhaps even with tiny leather sandals. Archaeologists have found such dolls buried with their own miniature furniture, tiny beds and chairs for a dollhouse of the imagination. But these exquisite toys held a deeper ritual purpose. A girl would keep her doll until the eve of her wedding day. Then, in a solemn ceremony, she would formally dedicate it to the goddess Diana, the protector of girls and virginity. This act symbolically ended her childhood, offering her toy to the goddess as she prepared to step into her adult life as a wife and mother. So a doll was never just a doll. It was either a testament to a family's love, crafted from nothing, or a beautiful, expensive symbol of a social rite of passage. In both forms, it prepared a girl for the world she was destined to join. The hairstyle carved into our ivory doll's head is not a simple shape. It is an intricate masterpiece of braids and curls, a miniature replica of the elaborate styles worn by empresses and noblewomen. A young girl would spend hours studying this coiffure, learning its complex architecture not for vanity, but as a crucial life skill. Her doll was a living mannequin, a three-dimensional textbook on the art of Roman fashion. Dressing this tiny figure in her woven tunic and formal stola was another vital lesson. Each fold of the miniature cloth, each precise drape, taught the girl the language of clothing that every respectable Roman woman was expected to master. The doll was far more than a plaything. It was a silent, patient tutor in the domestic arts that defined a woman's role in society. Through this daily ritual of dressing and styling, a girl internalized the expectations of her culture, learning to present herself with the grace and propriety demanded of her class. This was how she practiced for her future, one tiny braid and one miniature fold at a time. The doll's perfect appearance was a constant, tangible goal for her to emulate. And when the time came for her wedding, the dedication of this doll to the goddess Diana was the final exam. It signified she had learned all the lessons her miniature companion could teach. She had mastered the arts of the household and the codes of appearance, and she was now ready to leave the world of childhood play for the realities of adult life. How many other childhood games from this ancient world held such profound, hidden purpose? The sharp, clear note of a terracotta whistle cuts through 2,000 years of silence. We recreated one of the most common Roman toys, a small bird-shaped whistle molded from cheap local clay. Its production was a simple affair, pressed into a two-part mold by the thousands, fired in a kiln, and sold for a few small coins in a market stall. This was a toy for the masses, accessible to almost any child, from a merchant's son to a farmer's daughter. The skill lies in the hollow body and the precise placement of the mouthpiece and sound hole. When you blow into it, the sound is not a feeble peep, but a bright, piercing trill that would have carried across a crowded courtyard. Now, multiply that single whistle by a dozen different children, each with their own clay bird or figure. Add in the soft clatter of terracotta rattles and the shouts of play. Suddenly, the quiet, marble image of ancient Rome vanishes, replaced by the vibrant, noisy reality of a street filled with the sounds of youth. This universal love of making noise connects a Roman child to any modern child with a squeaky toy or a plastic trumpet. It is a fundamental, cross-cultural joy of childhood, the simple pleasure of filling the air with sound and declaring your presence to the world. That little clay bird was more than a toy, it was a voice. That bright trill of a clay whistle would have mixed with another sound, the soft clatter of bones on a stone step. The game was known as astragaloi, and every Roman child knew its rhythm. We recreated a set using the precise bones the Romans used, the cleaned and polished ankle bones of a sheep. Each one is a small, irregular block with 4 distinct sides, each side assigned a different numerical value. In a child's hands, these humble objects became a test of pure skill and dexterity. The simplest game was a lot like modern jacks. A player would toss one bone into the air, and in that split second, had to scoop up a specific number of bones from the ground before catching the one they had tossed. Watch a demonstration, and you see the focus it requires, the quick, precise movements of the fingers. It was a way for children to hone their coordination, a fundamental pastime echoing in schoolyards for centuries. But these small bones held a much deeper significance in the adult world. For Roman men, the same set of knucklebones transformed into dice. They would cast a handful onto a gaming board, the values on the upward-facing sides deciding their fate in a high-stakes wager. Soldiers would play for money, their shouts of victory or groans of loss filling the barracks. The bones were even used for telling fortunes. A soothsayer might cast them and read the pattern they formed, interpreting the will of the gods from their random fall. So this simple object, a child's toy, was also a soldier's gamble and an oracle's tool. A single set of knucklebones could define a person's entire life, from the innocent games of their youth, to the risks of their adulthood, and finally to the mysteries of their destiny. Mastering the simple toss and catch was just the beginning. As Roman children grew older, the game of knucklebones evolved into something far more complex, a pastime of pure chance and calculation that blurred the line between child's play and adult gambling. The 4 distinct sides of the sheep's ankle bone were each given a name and a value. The broad, curved side was called the belly and was worth 3 points. The opposite, narrower side was the back, valued at 4. The 2 flatter sides were the concave and convex, worth 1 and 6 points respectively. With these values established, the game transformed. Players would throw 5 bones into the air, attempting to catch them on the back of their hand. The real skill, however, came in a second, more difficult throw, where they tossed the bones again to catch a specific combination, much like rolling dice for a particular poker hand. The highest possible throw, where all 5 bones landed showing a different side, was called the Venus throw, a moment of perfect, divine luck. This was no longer just a game of dexterity. It was a game of probability and risk. The same mathematical mind that could calculate the odds of a Venus throw could also assess the risks on a battlefield or in a business deal. This is where a child's toy seamlessly transitioned into a man's vice. In the barracks and taverns, these very same bones became dice for high-stakes gambling. Soldiers would wager their hard-earned pay on the toss of the knucklebones, their fortunes literally resting on which way a piece of a sheep would fall. We know this was serious business because archaeologists have found knucklebones that are far from ordinary. Some are lavishly gilded in gold leaf, while others are intricately carved from precious materials like ivory or semi-precious stone. These were not the simple, polished bones of a child. These were the gaming pieces of the wealthy and the elite, used in games where the stakes could be a slave, a piece of property, or a vast sum of money. For the Romans, this object embodied a fundamental truth about their world. Life was governed by Fortuna, the fickle goddess of chance. She could lift you to the heights of power with a Venus throw, or dash you to the rocks with a worthless toss. The knucklebone, in its beautiful and brutal simplicity, was a physical manifestation of that belief. It taught a child about skill, but it reminded an adult that no amount of skill could ever truly conquer luck. The rhythm of knucklebones was often accompanied by the steady thump of a ball against a wall. A Roman child almost always had a peeler close at hand, a simple sphere that was the centerpiece of countless games. We recreated the 3 most common types to understand this everyday object. The simplest was a ball of solid, stitched cloth, stuffed with feathers or wool, soft and safe for younger children to toss indoors. Then there was the leather ball, carefully sewn and stuffed with hair or rags, giving it a firm, satisfying weight. But the most advanced was the follies, a larger ball made from an inflated pig's bladder, carefully encased in a protective leather skin. Bouncing this recreated follies produces a hollow, resonant thud, a sound that would have been as familiar in a Roman courtyard as the chirp of a clay whistle. Each type of ball was suited for a different kind of play. The soft cloth ball was for simple catch, while the stuffed leather ball was perfect for more vigorous games of handball, where players would hit it back and forth against a wall, using only the palm of their hand. The inflated follies, however, was for a truly energetic team sport, a game where players would work together to keep the large, bouncy ball in the air, much like a primitive version of volleyball. This was not mere child's play. Romans saw ball games as essential for physical development, building strength, coordination, and agility. You would find young men and boys playing these games in the palaestra, the open-air exercise ground attached to every major public bath complex. Here, the slapping sound of a hand striking a leather ball would mix with the grunts of wrestlers and the splash of swimmers. For a Roman, a healthy body was a virtuous body, and the humble ball was a fundamental tool in that pursuit. A child learning to control her follies was not just having fun. They were training their body and learning the value of teamwork, lessons that would serve them in the military or in civic life. That simple, bouncing sphere was a classroom in motion. A metal hoop clattering over cobblestones was the sound of Roman childhood in motion. We recreated the classic trochus, a heavy ring of bent wood, though some wealthier children might have had one of bronze. Its companion was not a fancy tool, but a simple, sturdy stick of wood, its ends sometimes tapered to better guide the hoop's path. The goal was deceptively simple. You set the hoop rolling and then ran alongside it, using the stick to tap its upper edge, constantly correcting its path to keep it from wobbling and falling. Watching our replica in action, you see the immediate challenge. It demands a perfect synergy of speed, balance, and a gentle touch. A child too slow would watch the hoop tumble. A tap too hard would send it careening off course. This was a full-body exercise, a sprint that built stamina and refined motor control in the open air. Far from being dismissed as mere play, this simple game was actively encouraged by Roman thinkers. Philosophers and physicians saw the trochus as an ideal pastime, one that developed a strong, agile body and a focused mind. In a society that prized physical virtue, the sight of a boy chasing his hoop through a courtyard was a sign of good health and proper upbringing. It was a common, everyday spectacle, from the bustling, crowded streets of the Subura to the spacious gardens of country villas. The rhythmic clatter of wood on wood was a universal signal that children were at play, mastering their own bodies through the relentless, rolling circle of the trochus. A miniature ceramic pot, small enough to fit in the palm of a child's hand, was a tool for learning the rhythms of an entire household. We recreated a full set of these tiny vessels, from little cooking pots and pans to miniature plates and jugs, each one a perfect, functional replica of the objects that filled a Roman kitchen. For a young girl, this was her introduction to the complex world of domestic management. She would practice the motions of cooking, of serving food, and of storing provisions, all within the safe confines of play. This was not a random assortment of trinkets. It was a deliberate curriculum. Through handling these tiny tools, a girl learned the weight of a water jug, the balance of a pot over a pretend fire, and the social script of offering refreshment to guests. She was rehearsing for her future role as the mistress of a home, a position that required skill, organization, and grace. The same principle applied to boys, but with a different focus. Alongside those tiny pots, we find miniature swords carved from wood, small axes, and even little toolkits. A boy with a wooden gladius was not merely playing at soldiers. He was internalizing the posture and discipline of a legionary. Another boy with a tiny hammer and chisel was learning the foundational gestures of his father's trade. Whether he was destined to be a carpenter, a stonemason, or a metal worker. This was the core philosophy of Roman play. Imitation was the highest form of preparation. A child's world was a direct, scaled-down reflection of the adult world they were about to enter. Every game, every toy, was a subtle lesson in the skills, social roles, and responsibilities that defined their culture. The line between a plaything and a training tool was virtually non-existent. So the next time you see a child playing with a toy kitchen or a tiny workbench, you are witnessing a tradition that is thousands of years old, a fundamental human impulse to practice for life itself through the powerful, imaginative world of play. A simple grid of lines scratched into a stone step was a Roman child's battlefield. We recreated the most famous of their strategy games, Ludus Latrunculorum, the game of mercenaries. This was not a game of chance, but a pure contest of military intellect, a precursor to games like chess and checkers. The board itself was often nothing more than a permanent grid carved into a bench in a public square or a courtyard floor, always ready for a match. The pieces were equally humble, often just pebbles or broken pottery, though wealthier players might use colored glass or carved bone. Our replica uses two sets of smooth, polished stones, one set dark, one light, moving across a wooden board etched with the classic grid. The objective was simple in concept, but deep in execution: to capture your opponent's pieces and achieve dominance on the board. Each piece moved like a rook in chess, in straight lines along the grid for as many empty spaces as desired. The capture mechanism was the heart of its tactical brilliance. You did not take a piece by landing on it. Instead, you trapped an enemy piece by flanking it on two opposite sides with two of your own. This simple rule created an endless dance of attack and defense, of feints and ambushes. A player had to think several moves ahead, sacrificing a single piece to set up a devastating counterattack that could capture multiple enemies at once. This was a game that trained the mind for the realities of Roman warfare, where outmaneuvering an enemy and cutting off their lines of retreat was the key to victory. A young boy hunched over this board was not just playing a game. He was learning the fundamental principles of strategy that would one day be used to command legions. The clack of a stone piece being captured echoed the strategic thinking that built an empire, all contained within a simple grid scratched in stone. The strategic clash of Ludus Latrunculorum was not confined to quiet courtyards. Its true heart beat loudest in the bustling, noisy atmosphere of a Roman tavern. Imagine the scene: men from all walks of life hunched over a board permanently carved into a stone table, the air thick with the smell of wine and roasting meat. A soldier on leave might be locked in a tense match against a local merchant, their wages of a few coins resting on the edge of the board. This was more than a game, it was a vital social ritual. In a world without digital distractions, the public house was a hub of community, and board games were the engine of that interaction. They broke down social barriers, allowing a freedman to challenge a citizen, if only for the duration of a game. The clatter of pieces and the shouts of victory or defeat were the sounds of Roman society at play. But these games traveled everywhere. In the long, quiet hours guarding a remote frontier fort, a soldier would pull a small, portable gaming board from his pack. He would scratch the grid into the hard, packed earth of the rampart and use pebbles to play against his comrade. This was not just a way to pass the time, it was a crucial mental exercise, a way to maintain the sharp, tactical thinking required for survival, all while strengthening the bonds of brotherhood that held the legions together. Back in the wealthy domus, the private home, board games took on a more refined, but no less competitive, character. Families would play after dinner, using beautifully crafted sets of ivory and glass. Here, a father might use the game to teach his son about foresight and planning, the moves on the board serving as metaphors for decisions in business or politics. Gambling was the constant, thrilling undercurrent in nearly all these games. From the soldier betting his extra rations to the senator wagering a valuable ring, the risk of loss heightened the excitement and engagement. It transformed a simple pastime into a microcosm of life itself, where fortune could smile or frown in an instant. This universal appeal, from the lowest tavern to the highest villa, reveals a profound truth about the Roman world. The need for connection, for friendly competition, and for testing one's luck was a force that united every level of their society, all played out on the simple, enduring grid of a game board. With a flick of the wrist, a simple wooden cone springs to life. We carved this Roman spinning top from a single piece of hardwood, its point sharpened to a fine tip on a stone, just as an ancient craftsperson would have done. The technique is beautifully simple. You can roll the stem between your palms and launch it, or wrap a thin cord around its body, hold the end taut, and then pull sharply. The top leaps from your hand, its point finding a tiny, perfect balance on a piece of slate. For a few glorious seconds, it defies gravity, humming with a soft, whirring energy as it spins. The physics behind this magic is the principle of rotational inertia. Once the top is set spinning rapidly, its angular momentum wants to keep it rotating around its central axis. The sharp point minimizes friction, allowing it to pivot on a nearly invisible spot. It will only begin to wobble and finally fall when friction and gravity slowly steal its energy. This simple demonstration of fundamental physics was a daily wonder for a Roman child. They did not know the scientific terms, but they understood the pure, visceral joy of creating that perfect, stable spin from a seemingly unstable object. And this fascination was not unique to Rome. From the icy villages of the north to the bustling markets of Asia, every culture on Earth developed its own version of the spinning top. This was not a case of shared ideas, but of parallel discovery. The spinning top represents a universal human impulse, a deep-seated curiosity about motion, balance, and the temporary defiance of a fundamental force. A child in Rome, a child in China, and a child today all share that same moment of breathless anticipation, watching a simple toy perform its impossible, twisting dance before it gently comes to rest. A miniature legion marched across the floor of a Roman nursery. We recreated an entire century of soldiers, each one meticulously cast from lead, their tiny shields and javelins perfectly detailed. Alongside them stands a spectacular toy chariot, its bronze body gleaming, pulled by a team of 2 powerful horses. This was the ultimate fantasy play for a Roman boy. With these toys, he could refight the Battle of Zama, conquer Gaul with Caesar, or defend the frontier from barbarian hordes, all within the safe confines of his own home. The sheer quality of these replicas is staggering. The chariot's wheels actually turn on a delicate axle, and the horses are sculpted in mid-gallop, their muscles taut with energy. This was not just a toy. It was a physical embodiment of the stories he heard from his father and uncles, a tangible link to the glory of the empire. For the son of a senator or a wealthy merchant, these expensive metal toys were a constant reminder of his birthright and his future duty to lead and to conquer. But for the vast majority of Roman boys, such luxuries were out of reach. Their armies were carved from scraps of wood, simple stick figures with a knife scratch for a face. Their chariots were a block of wood on 2 crude wheels, pulled by a string. Yet the imaginative play was identical. A child does not need bronze to understand the thrill of a cavalry charge or the strategy of a flanking maneuver. Whether his soldiers were lead or pine, he was learning the same crucial lessons, absorbing the militaristic values that were the very bedrock of Roman society. From their earliest years, boys were taught that Rome's greatness was forged by the sword, and that their own worth would be measured by their courage and their service to the state. These toys were the first, most powerful textbooks for that lifelong education. The nursery was not a peaceful retreat. It was a training ground where future generations practiced the art of expansion and control, one tiny, imagined battle at a time. That lead soldier in your hand started its life as a pool of liquid metal. We constructed a reproduction mold based on those found in the workshops of Roman toy makers. 2 flat stones, carefully carved with the mirror image of a legionary. The process was brutally efficient. The 2 halves of the mold were clamped together, and a small crucible of molten lead was poured into a channel at the top. In less than a minute, the metal cooled and solidified. The mold was opened, and there he was, a perfect 3-dimensional soldier, still attached to a sprue of excess metal from the pouring channel. This was the secret to their affordability. A single mold could be used hundreds, perhaps thousands of times, allowing a workshop to produce a miniature army in a single afternoon. This was not bespoke craftsmanship for the elite. This was ancient mass production, putting a piece of the imperial military machine within reach of a middle-class child. The sheer volume of these tiny figures found by archaeologists tells a clear story. They were a common, popular toy, and we know exactly where a Roman parent would have gone to buy one. Excavations in towns like Londinium and Pompeii have uncovered the remains of tabernae, small shops, whose counters were littered with these very molds and discarded lead sprues. These were the ancient world's toy stores, their shelves stocked with terracotta dolls, clay whistles, and packets of knucklebones. A vibrant network of trade ensured that a child in a provincial capital like Corinth could play with the same style of lead soldier as a child in Rome itself. The desire to give a child a toy, to fuel their imagination with a tiny piece of a larger world, was a powerful economic force that connected the empire, one miniature legionary at a time. A simple wooden bird that could drink water might have perched on a Roman table. We are stepping into the most speculative and technologically fascinating corner of Roman play, the world of automata. While most children enjoyed rattles and spinning tops, the empire's most brilliant engineers were experimenting with self-moving machines. The legendary inventor Hero of Alexandria described devices powered by steam, weights, and counterweights that could open temple doors, play music, and even power a miniature, rotating theater. His work was not fantasy. It was precise engineering, documented in his manuscripts. The question that haunts archaeologists is whether these complex principles ever trickled down into the realm of toys. Could a Roman child have owned a moving figure, a trick cup, or a bird that sang? The archaeological evidence is maddeningly sparse. We have tantalizing fragments, like a small bronze horse from a child's grave whose legs are articulated in a way that suggests it might have been part of a more complex, pull-along mechanism that made it prance. There are curious ceramic vessels with internal compartments and hidden tubes that hint at trickery and surprise, perhaps used in a game or as a playful challenge at a banquet. These finds are rare and enigmatic, whispering of a level of sophistication in toys that we are only beginning to appreciate. To test the possibility, we decided to recreate a hypothetical toy based directly on Hero's designs. We built a simple automaton, a small theater where a scene of a blacksmith striking his anvil plays out. The mechanism is pure Hero, a system of weights and axles hidden inside a wooden case. As the weight slowly descends, it turns a central axle. A peg on this axle catches a lever attached to the blacksmith's arm, causing it to lift and then fall, creating the repetitive motion of hammering. The sound is a gentle, rhythmic click, a tiny mechanical heartbeat bringing a miniature world to life. Holding this device, you feel the boundary between myth and engineering blur. It is not hard to imagine a wealthy patrician commissioning such a wonder for his son. A toy that was also a lesson in the mechanical philosophy that governed the world. This was the cutting edge of ancient technology, a glimpse of an industrial revolution that never was, yet its principles were sound enough to be crafted into a child's amusement. Perhaps the greatest Roman toy was not a doll or a top, but the spark of invention itself, a playful curiosity about the hidden forces that move our world. The doll from Roman Britain feels different in your hands. Her body is carved from local dark wood, not the pale ivory of an Italian doll. And her face is a simple, solemn oval, without the intricate, fashionable hairstyles of the Mediterranean. She wears a tunic, but its design and the pattern of a Celtic brooch clasping it at the shoulder speak of a culture far older than Rome's arrival. We recreated her based on fragments found in a settlement in Britannia, a place where two worlds were colliding. This was not a rejection of Roman culture, but a subtle blending of it. A local craftsperson, perhaps the mother or father, carved this doll using traditional techniques and local materials. Yet the very idea of a jointed, articulated figure was a Roman introduction. The child who held her was living in a world of two halves. learning the new ways of the empire while still being surrounded by the familiar patterns and symbols of her ancestors. This doll is a quiet act of cultural negotiation, a toy that helped a child navigate a changing world. Far to the south, in the sun-baked provinces of North Africa, the story repeats with a different accent. Here we find clay animals molded in a distinctly local style. We recreated a camel. Its long neck and lanky legs a familiar sight on the streets of a Roman African town like Leptis Magna. The clay is local terracotta, the same used for centuries, but the camel itself might have been a toy for the child of a Roman merchant or soldier stationed there. The object is Roman in its function, a simple figurine for play, but its subject matter is utterly provincial, drawn from the daily life of the region. This was not a one-way street. Just as Roman styles influenced local crafts, these provincial toys, with their unique forms and characters, eventually made their way back to the heart of the empire. A wealthy family in Rome might display an exotic Egyptian wooden crocodile on a shelf, a curious souvenir of a distant land now under Roman control. A child in Pompeii could have a clay lion from North Africa, its mane stylized in a way no Italian artist would have conceived. Through trade routes and the movement of legions, these playthings became agents of a subtle cultural exchange. For a provincial child, a Roman-style doll or a wooden sword was not just a toy. It was a piece of the larger world they were now a part of, a tangible symbol of a shared imperial identity that stretched from the misty hills of Britain to the deserts of Syria. They were playing with Romanness itself, learning its forms and its functions, even as they held onto the familiar shapes of home. The sandbox of the empire was a melting pot, and every toy was a story of connection. That simple wooden bird whistle was just the beginning of the Roman soundscape. We crafted a set of panpipes from reeds and beeswax, binding them together in the traditional style. This was the fistula, an instrument with a voice far more complex than its humble materials suggest. Blowing across the top of the different length tubes produces a cascade of clear, airy notes, a simple scale that any child could learn to master with a little practice. The sound is hauntingly beautiful, a melody that would have drifted over courtyard walls and through quiet streets. Alongside the pipes, we built a small tympanum, a hand drum with a wooden frame and a stretched goatskin head. Tapping it with your fingers creates a soft, resonant thump, while a firmer strike produces a sharp, commanding crack that cuts through the air. These were not the instruments of professional musicians, who performed on elaborate lyres and alloy at banquets and theaters. These were the tools of everyday play, the first experiments in rhythm and melody. A child with a set of panpipes was not just making noise, they were engaging with the mathematical principles of sound, learning how the length of a tube dictates its pitch. A group of children with a drum and some whistles could form an impromptu parade, their joyful cacophony a celebration of community and shared fun. Music was woven into the very fabric of Roman life, from the hymns in the temples to the songs of soldiers on the march. And this integration started in childhood. Playing these simple instruments taught an ear for rhythm and an appreciation for harmony, skills that were as much a part of a well-rounded education as reading or rhetoric. It was a fundamental human expression, the universal childhood urge to create order from chaos and beauty from silence, one note and one beat at a time. A toy buried with a child is a whisper of profound love and heartbreaking loss. We recreated a small wooden horse and a simple cloth doll, objects found resting in the tiny graves of Roman children from Londinium to Carthage. These were not mere possessions discarded in death. They were provisions for a journey, carefully chosen gifts to accompany a child into the afterlife. A parent, facing an unimaginable grief, placed a favorite pull-along horse in the grave so their son would have something to play with in the next world. They tucked a soft, handmade doll beside their daughter as a familiar comfort in the unknown. These artifacts are among the most emotionally charged discoveries in all of archaeology. They transcend culture and time, speaking a universal language of parental love and the desperate hope that a child's play might continue beyond the grave. But this ritual of letting go was not reserved only for death. In the heart of a Roman home, a very different, more formal ceremony marked a symbolic end to childhood. For a girl on the eve of her wedding, the transition to adulthood was sealed with a sacred offering. She would gather her most precious childhood possession, her doll, and carry it to the household shrine, the lararium. There she would formally dedicate it to the goddess Diana, the protector of girls and virginity. This was not a quiet, private moment. It was a public ritual, a declaration to her family and the gods that her childhood was over. The doll, her constant companion and silent tutor in the arts of womanhood, was no longer needed. By offering it to the goddess, she was shedding her former self, preparing to embrace her new roles as a wife and mother. The dedication was a bittersweet rite of passage, a voluntary surrender of play that was both an ending and a beginning. Why would a culture so focused on family and lineage ask a child to give up such a powerful symbol of their youth? The answer lies in the Roman understanding of order. Every stage of life had its proper place and its defining duties. Childhood was for play and learning, adulthood for responsibility and procreation. The dedication of the doll was the final, definitive line between those two worlds. It ensured a clean break, a clear transition blessed by the gods. This ritualized farewell to a toy reveals a profound truth about the Roman mind. Even in the most intimate aspects of life, even in the world of play, there was a place for solemnity, for ritual, and for a deep, abiding respect for the natural order of things. A Roman child's world of play was shaped by the very earth beneath their feet. The materials they held tell a story of resourcefulness and a stark division between rich and poor, preserved for us only through a quirk of preservation. Stone, bone, and metal toys survive in abundance. We find polished marble gaming pieces, delicate dolls carved from ivory, and entire legions of lead soldiers, all durable enough to withstand centuries in the ground. But these were the luxuries. For most children, play was crafted from far more ephemeral stuff. Wood, cloth, leather, and woven reed were the true materials of the common Roman nursery, and they have all but vanished from the archaeological record, leaving a silent majority of childhood joy unaccounted for. We can rebuild this lost world by understanding the ancient craft. Take a simple wooden horse. A toy maker would start with a block of local hardwood, like oak or beech. With a small, sharp knife, they would begin to shape the body, shaving away curls of wood to form the arch of a neck, the curve of a haunch. The process was one of reduction, of finding the form hidden within the grain. No powered tools, no sandpaper, just skill, patience, and a feel for the material. The final toy would be smooth, polished by hand until it felt warm and alive to the touch. This humble object, loved for a few short years, would eventually splinter, rot, or be tossed into a cooking fire, returning to the earth from which it came. The story of clay is one of fire and mass production. A toy maker working in terracotta relied on molds. They would press wet, local clay into a two-part mold, often carved from stone, that contained the negative image of a bird, a pig, or a god. Excess clay was scraped away, the mold was opened, and a new, perfectly formed figurine was born. These green, unfired toys were then stacked in a kiln alongside pots and lamps. The fire hardened the clay, transforming soft mud into a durable ceramic toy that could be sold for just a coin or two. This process allowed for incredible volume, flooding the markets with affordable playthings. Yet even these fired clay objects are fragile. Most ended their lives as shattered fragments, discarded in a ditch or trampled back into dust. The toys that survive for us to find are the rare exceptions, the ones that were lost whole and lay undisturbed in a protective layer of soil. So the archaeological record is a distorted mirror, showing us a world of durable luxury and broken clay, while the softer, more common world of wood and cloth has simply faded away, leaving only the ghost of its presence in the soil. The first light of dawn would find a young boy in a wealthy patrician's home already at his lessons. The scratch of his stylus on a wax tablet, the only sound in the quiet atrium. But a break for the midday meal brought release. He might pull a leather ball from a chest, its firm weight a familiar comfort in his hand as he headed for the palestra at the public baths. There, amidst the shouts of men and the splash of water, he and his friends would slap the ball back and forth against a high wall, their game a blur of motion and laughter, building the strength and coordination his father valued. Later, as the afternoon heat waned, he could be found hunched over a permanent game board carved into a garden bench. The clack of his glass gaming pieces a sharp counterpoint to the splash of the fountain, as he outmaneuvered his tutor in a tense match of Latrunculorum. Meanwhile, in a more modest apartment overlooking a bustling street, his plebeian counterpart's day began with chores, but a spare moment was all she needed. Sitting on the stone step by her front door, she would pull a set of polished sheep knuckles from her pocket. The soft clatter of the astragaloid bones was her soundtrack, her fingers a blur as she tossed one into the air and scooped others from the ground, honing a dexterity she might one day use in the marketplace. Her brother, his own tasks done, chased a heavy wooden hoop down the cobbled lane, his stick tapping a frantic rhythm to keep the trochus upright, his breathless sprint a common sight in the crowded city. As evening fell and lamps were lit, the rhythms of play turned inward. The patrician boy might arrange his lead soldiers on the mosaic floor, marching them in perfect formation to conquer imagined barbarian kingdoms, their gleaming metal a reflection of the military parades he had witnessed. His sister, in her own room, would perform the final, solemn ritual of dressing her ivory doll, its intricate hairstyle a model for her own, rehearsing the social graces expected of her. In the plebeian home, a mother might hand her daughter a simple bundle of rags tied into a doll, a soft, comforting weight to clutch before sleep. The day for every Roman child, from the highest to the most humble, was a seamless blend of duty and play, where every toy was a tool, and every game a subtle lesson for the life that lay ahead. That pull-along wooden horse, clattering across a Roman floor, has a direct descendant in the plastic train chugging across your living room rug today. The fundamental design is identical, a wheeled object pulled by a string because the joy it sparks is timeless. A child's desire to make an object move, to control its journey, is a universal impulse that transcends 2,000 years of history. Look at a modern baby shaking a brightly colored plastic rattle. The sound is sharper, the materials synthetic, but the principle is the same as that ancient terracotta pig. It is a tool for sensory discovery, for learning cause and effect, and for filling a space with joyful noise. This continuity reveals a profound truth about childhood itself. The core activities of play are not inventions of any single culture. They are fundamental human behaviors, as essential as language or song. The dolls you may have held as a child continue a conversation that began in Roman courtyards. Whether it is a simple rag doll or a high-tech interactive figure, its purpose remains deeply rooted in the human need for imaginative rehearsal. A modern child dressing their doll, feeding it, or putting it to bed is engaging in the same kind of occupational play as a Roman girl learning to drape a miniature stola. The doll is still a patient tutor, a confidant, and a vessel for a child's emotions and aspirations. The context has evolved, but the underlying psychological drive to nurture, to role play, and to practice social scripts is unchanged. This is not a coincidence. It is a testament to how play prepares every generation for the complexities of human relationships and responsibilities. Even the strategic battleground of the Roman board game, Ludus Latrunculorum, lives on in your family game night. While we play chess or checkers on a printed cardboard sheet, the mental exercise is identical. We are still trapping opponents, thinking several moves ahead, and sacrificing pieces for a greater strategic gain. The clack of a captured stone in a Roman tavern has been replaced by the thud of a crowned king. But the thrill of a well-executed plan, the sting of a clever defeat, these feelings are ancient and universal. These games are more than mere entertainment. They are gymnasiums for the mind, teaching logic, patience, and foresight to every new generation that discovers them. So what does this unbroken thread from ancient Rome to the modern playroom truly tell us? It reveals that the heart of childhood is remarkably constant. The need for comfort, found in the soft grip of a doll, is the same. The urge to create and control motion, whether with a wooden horse or a remote-controlled car, is the same. The desire to test one's skill and luck, with knucklebones or with dice, is the same. The drive to learn through imitation, to rehearse for adulthood in a safe space of imagination, is the same. Our toys are the tools of this essential human work. They are the physical evidence of a shared experience that connects a Roman child to a child today, proving that while our worlds are built with different materials, the inner world of play, wonder, and learning is a timeless human inheritance. From the protective rattle of an infant to the strategic clash of mercenaries on a game board, we have walked through the noisy, vibrant world of a Roman child. These recreated toys are more than just replicas. They are bridges. They connect us to the universal language of play, a language spoken in the laughter of a toddler chasing a hoop and the quiet concentration of a girl braiding her doll's hair. Empires built of stone and law may crumble into history, but the fundamental joys and discoveries of childhood remain a constant thread woven through time, connecting our modern experience to one lived 2,000 years ago. Which of these ancient toys captured your imagination the most? Was it the clever strategy of the board game, the comforting sound of the rattle, or the intricate lessons of the doll? Share your favorite in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey into the mysteries of ancient life, subscribe for our next exploration into the past.